Dominance versus leadership. It's really interesting to me, and I think this goes back to the fundamental true nature of equines. You know, if you've watched the video on YouTube that I made about the fundamental error that occurs in horsemanship, it's because we mistake the true nature of equines. And this evening I want to go through some of the science about what we actually know is the true nature of equines, what they actually do, what the statistics tell us from leadership and dominance, and try and clear up some of that. Because for so long we've heard from trainers who tell us we've got to be the alpha male, the alpha female, the male, the stallion, we've got to be the boss, we've got to show them who's boss, and some of it's steeped in tradition and some of it's new age horsemanship stuff, and to be honest, I think it misleads people, because first of all, most of us aren't natural leaders, and certainly not in a different species, and also because horses, I don't think, need it, and that's what I want to show you tonight. We're going to look at some of the theory of dominance and the social hierarchy and what we actually do know about it, and then how that might mean we can do something different with leadership and how we present ourselves and make it achievable for anybody who actually wants to be a better leader with their horse, really. So usual format, you know, ask some questions down the side if you want to. As we go along, we'll try and answer them, or we'll get to them at the end if you want to save any real biggies for then. So, dominance hierarchy in humans is an organisation of individuals in a group that occurs when competition for resources leads to aggression. Competition for resources, and that's part of the key. When they studied the often cited example of pecking order in chickens, they found that such social structures lead to more stable flocks and reduced aggression amongst individuals. And I think this is where our misconception about pecking orders and leadership and dominance come from, is that we're basing it on this pecking order theory, that if you have in chickens a pecking order, it's much safer and everybody gets on better, and there's much less aggression. So therefore, if we did that with equines, the same thing would happen. But where does that take us? Well, the purpose of social dominance hierarchy is this prioritization of food and access to resources such as food, water, shelter, sex, that sort of thing. And most critically, the reduction of physical contact leading to the reduced injuries and social conflict. Nothing there that you don't already know. Right, I'm back. Don't panic. I have no idea why this happens, but we're working on it. So you already know this. The purpose of some social hierarchy is to avoid contest and social conflict, which seems to make sense for our horse trainers to tell us that we need to be the alpha to give everybody confidence and peace of mind. Our problem comes when we sort of think about the horse's perception of this, and the fact that we might want to be in charge of everything, but we really don't want access to their valuable resources. So the valuable resources of hay and space and comfort from other equines are not something that we necessarily want. So we're giving them some mixed messages. We only want to be in charge for the limited times we're there and on certain specific behaviours. And I think this is why it's quite often difficult for equines to understand the process of the interaction between the horse and the human. We do know that rank order changes over time, age, depending on the resource value, how much you want the food, how much you want the access to the mate, those sorts of things. When you're a foal, there's lots of change in rank order. When you're a lot older, it's much more established and there's not very much change. Now, here's a crucial factor. What's the lesson? Is that's why it's so difficult when you get older horses to go on and change the rank order. So it's much more challenging for them. In the herd statuses, in the wild, once they're established, those changes don't take place very often, and when they do, it's quite uncomfortable and quite difficult, and therefore it's something where there's a lot more conflict and potential for injury. So with your foal, with your youngster, do all the work, establish the rank order, do those things, which is another reason to work with your foals, but change rank order, and in older horses is much more difficult and much more of a challenge and much more likely to end up in some sort of conflict. And here's the vital domination equation. I'll explain what this means. And it isn't that the horse is actually doing this complicated algebra in its head. What you're looking at is two horses, A and B, and that you've got some value of the resource. You've got the resource holding potential and the cost of a fight. So imagine your two stallions on the prairie of Nevada that are sizing each other up. The value of the resource is the access to those females. You know, how badly do I want them? You know, a young male who's never had any access to females before, wow, that's a massive resource. Older stallion who's maybe bred lots, yes, it's a valuable resource, but how much does he really want to hold on to it? This resource holding potential then comes down to how good am I at fighting? How good am I at getting what I want? So if I've been in a bachelor herd, the more fighting I've done, the more practice I've done. Young stallion, not that experienced, maybe a bit smaller, resource holding potential a little bit lower, more experienced stallion, a lot higher, maybe able to take on this youngster. And then the cost. What's the cost of a fight? You know, could get seriously injured, death, wounds, all those sorts of things. Now, in the mind, this kind of equation is what you're seeing when the animal is working and working out what the other one's got to offer. You could put us into that equation if you wanted to. The value of the resource, say food, you know, really important to your domesticated horse in the middle of winter in a small environment. How important is it to you? Well, not really that important. Resource holding potential, well, that depends on the individual of the animal. They could have a really good resource holding potential, want to pick on us, want to pull faces, want to get that food, big, strong, maybe they've learned it from other people. What's the cost to the horse? Not very much. To us, quite serious injury. So those are the things that we could be starting to consider. And what you see here is this little equation that I kind of drawn up for you here. You've got your cowboy. I really, really want this, don't show me up. The resource holding potential, I've got years of experience and training, I can train anything. The cost to the cowboy, well, not much cost, I won't get hurt, but I'm so good. I mean, you've got the stallion here, I really want this resource, and I'm bigger and stronger than that two legs, but crucially, I don't know the cost. I could get really hurt and that might be fatal. Now, I'm not suggesting they have a conscious thought process where they go through these detailed algebraic equations, but this is a sense of what's going on when they're determining their behavior and what they're going to do. And this happens all of the time. And this is a key factor, this cost element. And it's why they don't use their strength against us. If you imagine it, they are much stronger than us. Actually, their resource holding potential is significantly greater than ours in nearly every situation. Yet they don't use their strength against us. So They don't place a high value on the things that we place a high value on. And conversely, we don't necessarily place a high value on things that they do. So there's space in that for us not to get too much conflict. Critically, they can't predict the cost of an interaction. When horses can't predict the cost of that interaction, they can't complete that equation, and therefore the tendency is for them to back away, to back down, to avoid that conflict because they can't complete the calculation. An example I always use is the stallion in Australia went in the paddock to take a rug off his mare. First day I was in Australia, and a paddock in Australia is about 40 acres. There's no stallion, but I can see the mare. Go down, get the rug off. I hear that kind of behind me. I think we're in trouble now. Turn around. There's the stallion, and he's obviously a bit upset. Someone's interfering with his mare. He's rearing up. He's kind of. I'm thinking it's too far to the fence here. So I jump up and down and scream and shout and swear and do all sorts of unsightly things, and he, after a couple of minutes, starts to get his feet on the ground and calm down, and so do I. And I walk up to him, I give him a rub, and just carefully back away, take the rug off the mare, and leave. You know, and people used to say when I told this story, say he knew you were the dominant stallion. You know, and I was just like, look at me. Do I look like a dominant stallion? He couldn't predict the outcome of having a fight with me. That's the truth. And so therefore he couldn't complete that equation. So it's really important that we think about this. They're not sure of our resource holding potential, at least to start with, but they can learn this, you know, if we teach it to them. And this is where it starts to go wrong with people saying, show them who's boss, and get into a fight with them and do those sorts of things. If you use your strength against an equine and they discover they are stronger than you, you've really got a problem. Because how are you then going to undo that knowledge? If you really want to control something they really want, how are you going to get in there and do it because of their real desire for it? And if they've had lots of experience of battles and you know the cost of it and know the cost of the conflict with you, then you've got a real problem. And that can be taught to them by other people, previous owners, trainers that have tried to show them who's boss, done that sort of thing. Then you've got to watch out, because now you've got a horse who knows how strong it is. Now, if you're big and tough and experienced, you can get away with showing them who's boss 90% of the time, I guess. But for most of us, we're taking a real risk. We're running the risk that actually we will show them how strong they are and they can complete that equation. Which is why I don't think we should ever run that risk, because it's so difficult to deal with once they've figured it out. So, 60-second review. Thought it'd be a good idea just to give you 60 seconds to write down the 3 most important important messages, or images if you want, that you take away from this first few minutes. What 3 things have kind of struck with you? If you write them down, if you want to stick any in the side box there so I can see them, that's great too. I am hoping you're all still there. There's this moment of terror in my thought process when all of a sudden I'm thinking, they've all disappeared and I'm talking to no one. Okay, so there's a good question. Is that a good thing? We have resource holding potential. This is that kind of battle over the hay when you're walking in the field and you've got a couple of horses trying to get ahead of you and you're trying to hold them off. This is your resource holding potential. Now, it can go either way. They can figure out how to get it off you, and that they've got bigger resource holding potential than you have, or you can manage to hold them off, and depending on your strength, courage, a loud voice, then you get into a problem. So it's about setting up the environment. It's about avoiding those points of conflict when you have to go into that. And totally, horses will always win the battle if we take them there. The great thing about the true nature of horses is they don't want the battle. And that's why it's so important for us to avoid that conflict with them. That's why I don't think we should be trying to be the dominant horse or establish those sorts of leadership and things like that, because we just don't have it there, not at all. And that's why I think we're fundamentally wrong. We're setting so many people up to do training where they actually get into this situation. If they get away with it, they look like geniuses. If they get it wrong, they got a problem. And it's not what most of us can do. They can kick harder than us, they can run faster, they can bite harder, they can do all that stuff. If we don't push against them, they don't need to push back. So let's talk about this question from Sally. Some will want food, but if they know they will always have enough, the strong need to fight for it should decline. Yeah, absolutely. Resource holding potential is about the amount of resource that's available, how often it's limited, and the competition for it. So, in the middle of summer on a nice grass field, walking in with some hay, you're going to get less resource holding or guarding or wanting to do that. Get a horse that's had a history of starvation or lack of food, they're going to have a greater resource holding potential or desire to get hold of that food for a long time. If you've got an animal that wants lots of attention from you, give it loads of attention first. That need will be fulfilled, and then it kind of diminishes a little bit. So we can work in those ways to make sure that our environment provides for some of this of their valuable resources that they need, but it's always potentially a point that's there. So let's have a look at some stats. This is based on a book called The Wild Horses of Great Basin by Joel Berger, 1986. 149 horses studied over 5 years, over 8,000 hours of study. A phenomenal piece of work of feral horses. And the information came back as this. Less than 1% of the 2,150 intra-band interactions included female involvement. Less than 1%. That's about, 21.5 times the females between interbands actually got involved with any sort of competition or fighting. Almost all of the interactions between interbands had some sort of male aggression, and we'll look at that in a moment. However, 98% of a stallion's time is spent in non-aggressive activity. 98%. But of course, we're led to believe by watching the videos of wild horses, there's lots of fighting, because just watching some stallions grazing is really boring TV. So we don't see that. We've got this misconception that there's lots of fighting, but of course there isn't. Stallions spend so much of their time just in non-aggressive activity. And in fact, in the 499 male-to-male confrontations, only in 3.5% of the cases could a dominant, brackets, winner be identified. So we're only talking about 15 times where actually you could say one horse wins in their conflict. But that's not the picture we're painting, because of course most people aren't going on real feral horses. We've done the famous thing that has been done with dogs, is that people have looked at domesticated horses and their levels of conflict and gone, wow, that's what horses do, they're always fighting and that sort of thing, as opposed to looking at some real world work. Most of the male skirmishes, 75%, lasted less than 90 seconds, you know, and we're back to that equation, figuring out who's going to get hurt, the cost, and avoiding those sorts of things. Yet most of our horse training goes into big, long sessions of hours and that sort of thing. I think there is both, Sally, and some fighting and some frustration, if you like. You want to avoid the fighting. That's ultimately what the stallions want to do, because there's too much risk involved in it. But if you have to, and your value you place on the resource you're guarding is big enough, you will take a fight. Now, whether that comes out of frustration of wanting to mate or breed, that would be down to a stallion. I'm not sure I'm qualified to make that analysis, if that's what you mean. Some reasons to be dominant. Obviously, you know, the one of breeding rights seems the ultimate one. I'll come back to that in a minute, Stallion. So, how do stallions get mates? Well, here's the percentages that we're looking at, and you can imagine which goes with which just here. Cooperation, that's where two stallions live in the same herd and work together. It's about 6% of stallion matings get to be done that way. But what's interesting, 45% of breeding opportunities come through sneak mating, capturing, dispersing mares, herding mares away that are separated from their own herd. 45%, nearly half of all of them come from that sneaky way. Only 48 in direct kind of challenge the van leaders. So again, our perception of that all stallions mate and by winning their females is a little bit out. Yeah, in coming back to what we're looking at, remember we're looking at the wild horse. In domestication, because of the environmental stress we placed upon our equines generally, there's more aggression, and I'll show you a few figures for that in a moment or two. In this study, looking at the horses in the Grace Basin, there was no clear, prolonged, consistent dominant status maintained. Right? On average, less than one individual per 3 hours of observation would be involved in food-related aggression during the most stressful season. So we're talking winter, early spring, before the animals have actually got access to food. Still less than one incident per 3 hours of observation. That's tiny compared to what we would see in a domesticated environment in the winter around some hay or some food that might be about. Aggression is seen in two other situations, water and infants. And that's when having a foal is the most consistent time that you see mares being defensive and protective consistently in a sort of a dominant way. We can see here that the ways that dominance is established, retracting the ears, moving towards an intruder, that was sufficient 92% of the time, about 1,342 times. Bites or actual bite attempts, only 8%, and less than 0.01% was actually involved in kicking. Tiny, tiny percentage of actual physical aggression. There's no clear relationship between dominance and the reproductive success, and they couldn't establish it. Now, if being dominant was vitally important to breeding, over 5 years you'd expect to see the more dominant females having an extra foal, or at least potentially being more successful, and that's not the case. Doesn't seem to happen certainly in this extensive study. So it kind of begins to make you realize actually being dominant doesn't really bestow any great benefit to the animal. especially if we're not even going to fight over food in the least stress time of the year for food. But we've still back to this thing where you've got to be the alpha female sort of myth, where what people are trying to say is you have to dominate your horse like a mare would in the wild. And this is just from a myth-busting point of view. It's so common, that we presume that the horse is trying to dominate us, or people say that they're being dominated. It's a word that sort of trips out of people's mouths when I'm talking to them. I think he's trying to sort of dominate me. I think she's being a bit dominant. She's showing some dominant behaviour. Well, you've got to try and be the boss. You've got to be the alpha. What people are really saying, I think, when they say this is equines only listen to dominant animals, and if you're not the dominant person, then give up, you will fail. Like in a relationship with an equine, we've got to be the dominant person, the dominant member of the partnership, otherwise it's not going to work. It's kind of an either or in those training situations that we're taught to believe. I don't think that's the truth, and I'll explain why in a bit. So what this says is people are telling you that you've got to be the dominant mare, you've got to be in charge, that you have to be in charge of your horse at all times. How realistic is that, I'm thinking? It's just not a sensible point of view. And I think leadership needs more than dominance to succeed, but you already know that. But I want you to understand some of the reasoning of how I've got to this understanding of where I think is good leadership. So just another 60-second recap, just to write down your reaction to the stats we have just covered, and how would you explain these figures to someone else? Fundamentally, we're starting to look at the true nature of horses. Do they really? Yeah, absolutely. What we're getting into here is that avoiding the fight is, of course, the most sensible thing you can do as a horse. Yep, you're going to need some leadership and direction, but you don't really want to fight for it unless you've got to. And yes, if we're getting two stallions and we're talking about breeding rights, there's going to be some fighting. But that's not typical of the equine herd or its natural behavior. Those are specific things that are related to being a stallion in the wild, trying to maintain your herd and your opportunity to breed. So we cannot use their natural behavior to justify dominance-based training methods. We don't want to compete for the same resources, and we don't want to steal their harem. So we're already on a different path. This poor horse here that's in this stressed environment doing some crib biting there, or just chewing the fence. There's this we don't tend to chew the fence. And so it's just that complete difference between what the environment creates and what we want from each other that leads us on to the other things. So the majority of male interaction takes less than 90 seconds, and there is no clear winner in 96.5% of interactions. And they seem to be happy to accept that. Back off, avoid the confrontation, yet we're told we've got to be the one who makes all the decisions. Females are hardly ever aggressive unless protecting their poles. These are not things that are suggesting that horses are naturally wanting to lead as dominators and be in control all the time. Most of the males we handle are geldings, not stallions, so that takes away some of the desire to keep the herd. And between females, dominance is consistently changing. That social hierarchy is changing. It's not as trainers advocate, and we'll take a glance at that in a moment. So these things are kind of different to what we're being told. When they do fight, they are bigger and stronger than we are, making them very dangerous animals. In a sense, I know, but it's something that we seem to miss out, that why would you even want to try and dominate an animal that potentially could squash you? We're back to understanding their true nature. So I thought it'd be interesting, why do trainers use dominance as a base for equine training? Possibly speed. If you can just bully an animal into learned helplessness, or just complying with you because it has to avoid conflict, you might get things done faster in some circumstances if it's minimal what you're trying to do. It could support the trainer's ego, I guess, in some cases. I hate to comment on that too much, but possibly for some people that might be a problem. It supports the incorrect belief in the nature of equines. So what people believe about equines and rearing and bucking and fighting causes them to develop these incorrect beliefs about you've got to be the one in charge and you've got to be the dominant animal. It's easier to do and to teach and follow. You've got to be in charge is much easier than, unfortunately, what I'm going to show you in a moment or two. It's easy to sell as horses need leadership, and that's not so bad. That's great. Yes, the horses do need some leadership, but what's really good leadership? You can disguise dominance as leadership if you say the right words, and I see that a lot. I was reading an article yesterday, exactly that sort of thing. Well, yeah, it's good to let the horse think for itself a little bit, but not too much, and you've got to make sure you tell it what to do and don't let it get away with anything, and control these things and push it here, and don't make them do what you want, otherwise they're just going to be taking the mickey, inverted commas. And of course the classic one, fear powers the need to dominate. For a lot of people, they're afraid of the horse, afraid of getting hurt, afraid of getting made to look a fool, all sorts of things like that, and therefore that fear powers this need to dominate the animal and control it. And that's why I think it persists. If you've got any other ideas why you think it persists, then please let me know, because I'd love to expand and learn about that. And that comes into what I call the pressure equation. Say it takes 50 pounds of pressure to make a horse back up. Well, there are two factors that influence the effectiveness of training: that's the pressure applied and the time taken. So let's presume we can apply 25 pounds of pressure for 2 seconds to get our 50 pounds to back this horse up, or we can apply 5 pounds of pressure for 10 seconds, or 1 pound for 50 seconds. The lighter we we need to apply less pressure and take more time. Now, this conflicts directly with wanting to be the dominant and make things happen quickly, and ego and all those sorts of things. But actually, when you think about it, we're talking about a human situation, and you are the employee, and your boss puts a lot of pressure on you to get something done really quickly. Is that great leadership, or just they're dominating you because they're the boss? If they help you and encourage you and give you more time and keep that pressure off to allow you to succeed, is that better leadership? I guess you'd have to be the judge of that. But for me, taking more time and less pressure is the key ingredient that you're looking for when you're looking at people and saying, are they using dominance or leadership, really? So why do you think trainers and the horse world prefer methods based on dominance? Any ideas? What's your personal take on it? Because I know the world's changing, and I know that we're starting to see more trainers talking about sharing, but in my experience is this: we are not there yet. I see thinly veiled things that actually, when you get into it, you see that people aren't really giving their horses the choices they pretend. And I think you're right, Philip. Great one there. It makes money. It sells. It's really easy to sell that pattern, and I don't have to work hard to learn it. You just tell me to be the boss. That makes sense. I'm just going to do it. And my brain's searching for order, searching for patterns. Makes sense. Means I can do it straight away. Yeah, I think it is harder to think about, definitely. I think our whole world is kind of based on hierarchies and dominance and uppers and lowers, and the boss and the employee and the sergeant major and the private and all those sorts of things. So we're so used to it, it makes sense in our brain that must work with equines too, and dogs and cats. Funny enough, it doesn't work with cats. You don't hear people saying, I'm going to be dominating my cat. Cat just goes, I'm out of here. You know? And I always like to do that thing where you species jump. So, you know, when people are talking about dominance, what would that work in different species? And we all know now, we're getting out there in the dog world, this dominance theory is being really challenged, and we know there's some dodgy science behind it. And I think the horse was a few years behind, but we will get there, definitely. So let's talk about the methods of leadership. Now, there are lots of different methods of leadership to compare them all today, but I've got a few down on paper for you, and these are the three key ones that I think you can add together to begin to create and identify your own leadership style. And as we go through these, I think it's really exciting to look at what you're already doing and start ticking off some of these things, because I think you'll identify you are already providing some good leadership, and the best leaders, I think, already are exhibiting these things. But good leadership means you're not having the ego to blow them up and realizing you're doing it. So it'll be interesting for you to tick them off as you go. So I've got some 3 styles of leadership, TSP: Transformational Leadership, Participatory Leadership, and Situational Leadership. You can take any one of these, but I kind of combine the elements to get something for you in the middle. So our Transformational Leadership. Leader using this style has integrity, sets clear goals. Just tick these off in your mind on a bit of paper if you want to. Has a clear vision of the future, walks the talk, expects the best from the team, horse, partner, encourages, supports, recognizes good work and appreciates the try, makes work stimulating, and helps people to see beyond their self-interest, to focus more on the team and the interests of the lead. Now, we don't necessarily get the horse to see beyond their self-interest, but that's what we'd ideally like. We'd like the horse to want to do it for us. How many times have you heard that? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the horse to want to work with us, want to do more for us, you know? Focusing on our needs as a team and a partnership, rather than just going, actually, I just want to stay in the field and go back and eat hay and grass, thank you. They inspire. In short, transformational leaders are exceptionally motivating, and they are trusted. When your team / horse trusts you, it's really fired up by the way you lead, and you can achieve great things. So you can see that this is coming from a business point of view, but for me, after much research, it's a really good way of clarifying some of the skills that we need for horse leadership and training. So that's the transformational research, and I know that some of you will be ticking that stuff off, because those of you I know on here this evening, I can tick off most of those things for you already. You are transformational leaders. Participative leadership. These type of leaders accept input from one or more of the group members when making decisions and solving problems. You see where I'm going with this already? But the leader retains the final say when choices are made. Group members tend to be encouraged and motivated by this style of leadership. This style of leadership often leads to a more effective and accurate decision, since no leader can be an expert in all areas. Input from group members with specialized knowledge and expertise creates more complete basis for decision making. So here is how this works. You've trained your horse, you've worked with him, you know that you can do that cross-country stuff. You're coming towards that jump. You ask him to go, and he says no. He refuses. Slams on the anchors. You fortunately stay on board, and you stop. Okay? Now, to me, you got 2 options. You give him a whack and tell him he's naughty and he should have gone over the fence, or you recognize he may just have saved your life. Because if that horse is trained, if he's capable of it, and he doesn't, he is telling you that in his opinion something is wrong and it's too dangerous to continue. Now, do you want to listen to that as a participatory leader, or do you want to ignore that input from your team member? see countless stories of where the horse does know better when it comes to jumping, when it comes to avoiding bogs on Dartmoor and Exmoor, when it comes to burnt out cars that are concealed down places, trailers that have dodgy floors. We have to listen to the partner. They've got a good reason for it, you know. And this is one of the hardest bits, I think, because we're taught or told we shouldn't. We're being weak. We're being manipulated. The horse is taking the mickey when we listen to them and go, you know what, he's not happy with it. There's something wrong. I need to investigate it. Doesn't mean to say that you won't, after full investigation, go, yep, we're going to do it anyway. We're going to circle around and we're going to have another go at this fence and see if we can get it right. It doesn't mean to say we're not going to say, yeah, we're going to work on getting in the lorry, but we are going to listen to our team member and take seriously what they say. They're 50% of the knowledge, and two brains are better than one. With their senses, with their thinking, why wouldn't we take it on board and pay attention to it? So that's the participative leadership aspect that we're bringing into this. And then, of course, situational leadership. Fundamental underpinning of the situational leadership theory is that there's no single best style of leadership. Effective leadership is task relevant, and the most effective, successful leaders are those that adapt their leadership styles to the maturity of the individual and the group or whatever they're attempting to lead and influence. The effective leader varies not only with the person / horse or group that's been influenced, but also depending on the task, the job, the function that needs to be completed. You can see the advantages. Your young horse is going to need a different style of leadership than perhaps your older horse, your new horse, your established horse. The horse that's nervous of doing a particular task, the horse that's confident of doing a different task. In a clinic situation compared to being at home. You know, situation demands that we change and work with it. Classically, I was talking to some scientists and a conversation about a horse that was used in a demonstration. Big horse had some problems, so they chose to use a chiffony in order to allow the smaller trainer to continue to do the demonstration. Now, to me, they didn't use situational leadership, because situational leadership would go wrong situation to use force and pressure. Let's actually slow things down. Let's make it easier. Let's take all that off. Let's just do less, change what we're expecting, and succeed because the situation demands it. But they didn't. No situational leadership, and there wasn't a great outcome. So we see these three things combining and why they compare favourably to our feral behaviour. They recognise the changing dominances in the herd. So we listen to the horse, sometimes he listens to us. We don't always presume that we know everything. They involve different members of the herd. So, you know, if we're working with several horses or working just for one, we're involving everybody at different levels as appropriate to the situation. We recognise the importance of the herd compared to the individual, that both of us are going to stay safe, that both of us are involved in this, that we both have an input, the experience, the knowledge, the different senses. And leadership changes with the situation and the environment as required. So there are times when we do need to have good leadership, and we need to make those decisions, and we need to be effective. But the times we can back away and let the horse have some of that leadership. And I know there's a traditional fear that if we give them a little bit, they'll take a lot. But none of the evidence from the study shows that's what they're going to do. That's not who horses are. Supportive, encouraging, not confrontational or aggressive. Nothing about horses that are confrontational or aggressive. Unless you're a stallion, yes, trying to gain access to mates. But as we're not going to compete on those areas that aren't even relevant for our horse-human relationship. Given these three types of leadership, how much would you estimate you're already doing each one? Which one do you need to do more of? And which one would you like to be better at? Just a little thought process, because I would pretty much guarantee you've got elements of all of those already. And it's nice just to see how well you're already doing in your leadership styles. I'm pretty much hoping that you are seeing that you're already doing some really good stuff. Actually, you've got the elements of these things going on already, and maybe you didn't know you were doing them, or that they had an official kind of name. But I hope that you're seeing how the three of them combine into the next element that we want to make happen. And this just brings us back to your principles as a leader. Correct principles are self-evident. They are a way to find our way in the world. Principles do not change but remain constant to provide direction, even the most difficult of times. Stephen Covey said that. And it's really true, because what I think we're looking at is principle-centered leadership. Like a compass. Are always pointing the way, and if you know how to read them, you won't get lost. So you've got those three elements: your transformational leadership, your participatory leadership, and your situational leadership. And in the middle there, I think you are getting that, where they all cross over, that principle-centered leadership. Your principles determine your leadership at any one moment, which one you're using or leaning on more than any of the others. Natural laws, they don't change or shift. They provide the true north that gives our lives when we're navigating the streams of our environment. So we'll go back to what we did previously in the webinar about looking at our principles, because they anchor us to the truth. Good leaders have good principles. It's their integrity, it's their truth, it's their honesty. They help us to be consistent. Develop your trust in yourself that you are going to behave in the correct manner, even when the chips are down, you haven't got time to think about it. My principles, they're all pretty evident. I will have shared them with you before, and it becomes relevant later on as we go through these, just measuring what a dominant trainer looks like and what a non-dominant trainer looks like. You're going to need those traits in different amounts at different times. Sometimes we must be patient, sometimes we need to push, sometimes we need to make key decisions, sometimes we stick to it, other times we listen and change our minds. And that's not weakness, that's real strength. It's common sense. It's easy to do when you care about the animal you're working with. So what we need is balance. Okay? Balance. Knowing what needs to be done and why. So one of the key factors, balance. But how do you know how to balance? How do you know when to ask, when to push, when to wait, when to get more from? As a leader, how do you know when you've gone over that line? Well, you have to feel it. You cannot know what the outcome will be. You can only feel what will be right at the time. And if you make good decisions, don't beat yourself up because you made the wrong one. Learn from them and don't make them again. But this habit of beating ourselves up that we should have had some crystal ball to have known what would have worked in advance of time is not going to be there, nor is it sensible or good for our health or for our leadership skills. Try to accept you're going to make decisions. You're going to do some stuff, and sometimes it goes wrong. Sometimes it stretches too far, and you go, "What was I thinking?" But that's okay. That's how you learn, and cut yourself some slack. How do you develop the right feel for what's right? Well, how do I know what's right? Experience. Now you've all got bucket loads of that. What works, what doesn't. That experience will tell us. We know when we've done right. We know when we've not done it so well. Great. No need to beat yourselves up. Just learn, move on. That's what good leaders do. But what is experience? Learning from doing. Obviously. It's getting out there and doing stuff. Now we're back into making the right steps and shaping plans and stretching the comfort zones properly, so that we learn from doing by being conscious, being aware of what we're doing is good and why. works, what doesn't. It comes from being in the moment, it comes from asking questions, it comes from sitting down afterwards making some notes, it comes from taking the video and watching ourselves and that would work, that wouldn't work, that was good, that wasn't so good. You know? It's the process of doing it, thinking about it. And one of the key questions you might ask yourself is, how would I do it better next time? Even if it went really well, there's no criticism about this. There's no negativity about this. How would I do it better next time? A good leader would always be asking themselves that. But what if I'm doing the wrong things then? I'm trying my best, but people keep telling me, then you'll learn. By shaping behavior, you'll only make little mistakes, and there'll be safe mistakes. If you're going to go out there and make great, big, enormous mistakes because you're going to jump to step 27, open the gate, let the horse run off, then that isn't good leadership. You're protecting your team. You're working in a way that allows everybody to learn, grow, to get better, to stay safe. That's the power of your shaping plans. That's the power of working in small steps, of keeping it simple. Small lessons that allow you to stop after 3 or 4 minutes and go, do I want to continue? Is it the right day? Is it time to back off? Have we done enough? Shall we do something different? That allows you that time to think. You become really conscious. Why am I doing this? No, really, why am I doing this? Is it for the horse or is it for me? And invariably, sometimes, unfortunately, it will be for us. That's okay. We do it in the right way and the balance is okay. Sometimes horses do stuff for us. I guess if you just left the saddle and the bridle in the field, even if it was bitless, and even if it was treeless, and said, up to you, put it on, take me round, or don't. I'd like to see, whether they did or didn't want to make that decision. So sometimes they are doing stuff for us. But how we achieve it makes it justifiable and a level of acceptance for ourselves. Is there a better way for the horse to learn? I see so much horsemanship now, and there was some competition this year, and people were talking about whether it was ethical or whether it wasn't. And I'm thinking, it doesn't matter what happened within that competition. The question is, was there a better way for the horse to learn? No way was that competition the right environment for learning for the animal. We could justify it because it was learning for people, and that's great. But we can't kid ourselves that it was the best thing for the horse. Demonstrations where we're setting things up. Yep, great for learning, but we should be asking only enough that the horse is capable of doing in that situation, so that we continue to have our principles in place and show good leadership sections. So how do we spot the difference between dominance and leadership? Well, in dominance, the horse is always expected to follow. It's kind of a set position. That doesn't change. You're expected to follow me. You're expected to do what I say and when I say. With leadership, sometimes the horse leads. It's a flexible position. It depends on the situation. Like the horse refusing out the jump. Actually, maybe the horse is in charge in this situation. We need to do that. Brilliant. Lovely story. A long time ago, a horse being ridden in the mountains in America. Thunderstorm. Massive lightning, dude ranch, so they've got about 13 people. It was a new trail guide, and she said, I didn't know where we were, but I knew I didn't need to be in the mountains on a thunderstorm with lightning and horseshoes, so I just let my horse go, and I put the rein down, and within 10 feet he turned left, dropped off the trail. It had taken us 4 hours to get to this point. Within half an hour we were back in the barn. So that horse knew exactly where to be, He was in charge, and I think that takes a lot of leadership to let someone else be in charge in those situations. Dominance, the use of language, key one. You're going to hear references to dominant behavior, being the boss, being the alpha, those sorts of things. In leadership, the language refers to shifting, the change of status, to rank order, to the development of different leaders at different times. Dominance, repetition of pointless control exercises. The horse is doing it again and again and again and again just to demonstrate that we can. The horse knows how to do it. Why are we still doing it? There are only so many times we need to do those things if we're teaching it. With leadership, we learn and move on. Let's not do pointless stuff that bores our pants off either. The horse or myself. Crawford Hall, one of the most amazing horse people I've ever met. Quadriplegic because of a riding accident. when he was riding, he said, I came out the arena one day and I spun my horse like they do in raining, cutting round and round, back and forth. He said, and I stopped and I kind of thought, what, I spun this horse like 28,000 times. He said, why am I still doing it? And he said, I never ever spun my horse ever again apart from in competition. And you know what? He never ever forgot. And I think that's kind of key for me. Learn, move on. Let's not just do pointless things just because we can or it makes us look good. In dominance, we see an escalating use of pressure. We get bigger. Because we want that horse to follow, we have to get bigger and bigger. In leadership, we see an escalating use of time. Dominance, the response of the trainer to different horses and situations is pretty much the same. I've got my method, I use it, and I keep doing it. Whereas in leadership, trainer changes expectations and approaches depending on the horse and the situation. So you'll see those little changes that the leadership trainer will use. Slightly different for this horse because he's got a different learning style, or because he's a little bit less experienced, or he's a bit older, or we're in a different environment. In dominance, it doesn't feel comfortable to watch, especially with the sound off. One of my key things is always turn the sound off the video and the DVD and see what you feel. And in real dominant types training, that you just get that sense that you're not comfortable because you can empathize with the horse. Your mirror neurons will replicate what you see in the horse's body language. Whereas with leadership, it feels comfortable to watch with the sound off. Now, it obviously depends on the development of your own ethics, your own principles, where you are on your own path to horsemanship. But certainly it's there for you to be able to feel comfortable with what you're watching. Finally, in dominance, the trainer's principles are pretty unclear, unless the one clear one is that you will do what I say. Leadership, the trainer's principles are on display and they are lived up to. Okay? When I go into business leadership, Richard Branson, it's all about reputation. It's about being measured and acting consistently with who you are, so people can trust you and people can see what you do, and they know how you're going to behave in the future based on how you behaved in the past. Whereas when we're using dominance, we're just going to change what we do to get what we want. That's essentially what we're up to. So, what about the horse, donkey, or mule? What are we going to see? Well, in dominance, we're going to see an animal that is tense and watchful because they don't want to make mistakes. They're hesitant because they don't want to make those mistakes. So they might be a little bit slower just offering the behavior or thinking things through. They avoid or making or struggles to make the choices for self. So I saw a horse in Scotland a long time ago, stopped in the middle of the arena. This horse had been heavily, naturally horsemanship of a particular style, and I said to the owner, just you go to one side of the arena and we'll just see. And one side of the arena was the owner. One side of the arena was this massive grass bank. There was no fence around the arena, so just a standstill. The horse had a choice: go to the owner, wander off, go to the grass bank and eat. You've got to figure a horse should make one of those decisions. And this horse looked at the grass bank. He looked at the owner. He looked around, and then he just gave up and stood there and did nothing. Just dropped his head and went, whatever. Wait till somebody tells me what to do. For me, that's not where you want to see a horse. Free choice, go where you want to do. Go eat the grass, go wander off, go sniff, go see some other horses. No, just stand and wait till I tell you what to do. That's kind of, for me, is not where I want to be at. Does what they're told, when. If we've got some leadership going on, we tend to see the animal being more relaxed and calm. If our leadership is appropriate, it's asking them the right things in the right places. If you've got no leadership and you've got a horse that's a natural follower, you could have a problem. They may not be relaxed and calm on account of the fact that they're making decisions they don't want to have to. So a good leadership would be about you making those decisions, doing your training, building up their confidence, allowing them to be able to solve problems. Back to the webinar of a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about building confidence, trust, and problem solving. They offer behaviors willingly, and it works with the human, but able to choose for itself. My apologies. To choose for itself. So you've got a horse that is prepared to go, I'm not sure about that. I don't necessarily want to do that. It takes a certain kind of leader to listen to someone saying, are you sure that's right? But that's where you've got both of you putting the input on. they will make questions about your decisions. So they're gonna question what you say. You're gonna ask them stuff, and they're gonna go, "Are you sure? Do you want to do that? Oh, okay, let's do it." It might take them in the training process a few more times to be convinced or to try it out, because they have their own thinking process and they're allowed to have that. If both you and your boss are of the same opinion all the time, one of you probably isn't necessary. Just to say, the relationship, how to get the relationship you always wanted, contains lots of those exercises that help you develop some of those principles and some of those aspects. So what I want from you now is any questions that you've got as we've been through this, why I think we're doing the wrong thing in horsemanship, and to look at this principle-centered horsemanship where we're using our transformational horsemanship, our situational horsemanship, and our participatory horsemanship that you guys are already doing, that's common sense, that's easy to do, where we trust ourselves to make those decisions and try things out. So if you've got any questions, if you've got any thoughts, if you've got any comments, that's a good time to type them in now. We can see if we can deal with them, so that we can make sure everybody gets what they want out of this session. Has it made sense to you? Has it reassured you that you're probably doing a good job already? You just need to trust yourself a little bit more.